Okay, so as we all know, Zohran Mamdani will be the new mayor of New York City. And I really want to talk about a few important things that the majority of Zohran voters here in New York City don't seem to understand. The majority of people that voted for Zohran Mamdani here in New York City are living in Brooklyn. And to nobody's surprise at all, these people are mostly white liberals. The very people that have moved into Brooklyn and have voted for Zohran Mamdani are people that have benefited from capitalism. These wealthy transplants that have moved into Williamsburg and Bushwick and Bed-Stuy, Clinton Hill, all can afford to live here because of capitalism. And now they want to push socialism and make everyone else rely more and more on the government, even though these are the types of people that do not need to rely on the government themselves. But they think for other people, relying on the government equates to more dignity and success. Brooklyn itself had some of the most votes for Zohran Mamdani in all of New York City. And I want to talk about the gentrification of Brooklyn, specifically Williamsburg, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, because I have lived in Brooklyn for 13 years now, and I have seen this gentrification take place right before my own eyes. And I don't exclude myself from it. I'm very much another statistic in that gentrification process. But at least I don't walk around parading socialism, pretending like that's what got us here. And that socialism is what's going to afford other people to be able to also afford the things that people like myself have. The people that claim that they want equity and dignity for other people seem to completely miss the main point that capitalism is what affords people freedom of movement, luxuries in life. And these people say that they don't care about the luxuries of life. But we're going to go through some statistics and some footage to show you that this is all hypocritical, because these neighborhoods in Brooklyn have only seen an increase in luxury retail and housing, a decrease in racial diversity, an increase in educated populations. And the very people that claim that socialism will be the answer for those that are suffering are the very people that have moved into the neighborhoods that were predominantly Black or Hispanic, have pushed them out in the process, and have used capitalism to their own benefit. I went and walked around Williamsburg, one of these neighborhoods in Brooklyn, to look at which apartment buildings I saw Zohran flyers in. And I wanted to know how much those apartments cost. So this first apartment, lovely new brick building with enormous arched windows, which are definitely a luxury here in Brooklyn, had this big New York loves Zohran in their window. This apartment rented earlier this very year for $7,200 a month. That's over $80,000 a year. This is much more than what 90% of people can afford to pay. The next apartment was another relatively new build on McCarran Park, has that traditional soulless new build vibe. And this apartment is a 1-bedroom apartment renting at $5,400 a month, and this also rented out this year. These are people that can outspend 90% of others to rent these apartments. This next apartment also had beautiful big windows, a lot of sunlight. As you can see, those plants were really thriving. And this apartment was $6,500 a month, also rented out last year. So very recently. So what is my point here? My point here is that these people are prime examples of benefiting from capitalism. And yet they want to introduce socialism as a way to quote unquote help others while pushing those types of people out of these neighborhoods by simply being able to afford much, much more than them. But they think that socialism is going to be what helps those people, not capitalism, even though capitalism has clearly helped them. So let's take a look at the actual numbers here when we look at the gentrification of Williamsburg and Bed-Stuy. In 2000, the racial demographic of Williamsburg was 52% Hispanic and 29% white. In 2023, Hispanic population saw a decrease of 35%, while the white population increased by 21%. We also saw that in 2000, only 32% of people had a bachelor's degree, versus in 2023, we see 62%. And the income required for a 1-bedroom, when we look at 2000 versus 2023, and this is adjusted for inflation, All that was needed for a one bedroom in year 2000 was $50,000 a year. Now in 2023, and I'm sure it's only gone up since 2023, a one bedroom requires $164,000 a year income. We also see that a Chanel and Hermes store opened in 2023 in Williamsburg, amongst so many other luxury retail buildings and stores, because this caters to the very population of people that have come to Williamsburg in droves while pushing out other people that used to live here. A 2-bedroom apartment on the Williamsburg waterfront, where these stores really have started to pop up in droves, goes for $9,400 a month. Over $100,000 a year in just rent. But again, Williamsburg, apparently, the population here all wants socialism. Over 80% of the population in Williamsburg voted for Zohran Mamdani. All right, let's look at Bed-Stuy. The Bed-Stuy racial demographics in 2000 were 82% Black with 3% white. In 2023, we saw 41% Black and 27% white. 15% of the population in year 2000 had a bachelor's degree, and in 2023, 45% had a bachelor's degree. And when we look at the incomes that were needed for a one bedroom in year 2000 was $48,000 a year, and in 2023, that went to $125,000 a year. The very people that heavily saturate these neighborhoods in Brooklyn that voted for Zohran Mamdani are the Colonialists, which is funny because they love to play identity politics and white guilt, saying, you know, America's a colonialist country and we owe all these different groups of people reparations. Yet these people are literally colonizing all of Brooklyn and then voting for a socialist mayor. They're telling people that they should rely on the government because that will somehow create more equity amongst us. That will never bring those populations of people up to the same level of playing field. All it does is further push those people out because affordable housing is not going to be built in these neighborhoods. It's going to be built on the outskirts of New York City. The market rate for apartments in these neighborhoods will only increase the more and more we see capitalists move into these neighborhoods. These people are not relying on the government, but they want everyone else to rely on the government because they think that is how we reach dignity for all. And this whole conversation about rent freezing is also extremely ignorant because we have seen the rent be frozen over multiple times in the past decade. And we've also seen a clear correlation between rent freezes and more foreclosures by single-family homeowners. The irony of wanting rent freezes while going around and hating on the fact that there's so many new luxury builds that were built by PE firms and institutional investors. The irony is so potent, considering that when you freeze the rent, single-family homeowners cannot afford to renovate and maintain these buildings to keep up with the market. There have been around 2,000 foreclosures since 2015 in Bed-Stuy. And these foreclosures serve as a clear entry point for these institutional investors to buy up these properties, renovate them, and then list them at fair market value, which is much higher than what the single family homeowner would be able to charge for a rent stabilized unit. Through 2015 and 2025, over 50% purchases in Bed-Stuy were made by institutional investors for single family homes. So all of those brownstones, the Brownstone Brooklyn voters that supported Zohran Mamdani, used to be owned by Black populations in Bed-Stuy and had been pushed out through rent freeze after rent freeze, tax increase after tax increase, and eventually institutional investors were able to claw their way in because of this. We saw a rent freeze in 2015 through 2016. We saw another one in 2020 through 2021, and then another one in 2024 through 2025. These very people that claim to be so full of virtue, that claim that socialism is the way forward for those that are not as privileged as them, are the very same colonizers that flooded Brooklyn, pushed out over 22,000 Black families in just one decade, and voted en masse for a socialist mayor. A socialist mayor that comes from a filmmaker mother and professor and businessman father who went to an extremely expensive liberal arts college to get his degree, went to a private school growing up, has benefited from capitalism alongside all of these other people in Brooklyn. As you can see, the educated population has only gone up fucking tenfold. The white population has gone up tenfold. These are all people that have reaped the benefit of capitalism and now want to rip it away because they think that rich people don't care about people suffering. Rich people don't care about Black people. Rich people don't care about immigrants. No, that is not what it is. The fact of the matter is that most people that are millionaires in New York City are self-made, and they made it through capitalism. And if you wanted to share the benefit of capitalism, you would not encourage more and more people to rely on the government. We are literally seeing how easy it is to have food ripped away from you if you rely on the government for it. Brownstones in Bed-Stuy and Clinton Hill are so expensive. I believe the average cost is over $1.2 million, but here are some examples of clearly freshly renovated brownstones. And the only people that can afford to buy these are people that have found success in this country by going to school, getting a corporate job, entrepreneurship. They are not exploiting other people. They're working in a capitalistic society and reaping the benefits. And this is not a discriminatory society. Capitalism is not discriminating against anyone. Socialism will be inherently discriminatory because the people that rely on the government are already starting from a lesser position than everyone else. And the people that are pushing for socialism are the ones that don't need to rely on the government. They can achieve upward mobility because of that. And there's dialogue online about how Zohran Mamdani won because there are so many young 20-year-olds disenfranchised with the system because they don't make any money and they can't afford things. That might be partially true, but the majority of these people are not disenfranchised. They have literally found success through capitalism. And now they're virtue signaling so hard because everyone in New York City judges each other based on how liberal they are, that they're going to encourage more and more people to rely on the government and therefore struggle with upward mobility. The hypocrisy is so potent. But the problem is these people are not even aware of it. They're not intentionally being hypocritical. They truly believe that socialism will raise the quality of life, even though their quality of life has been raised because of capitalism. The gentrification process of Brooklyn has been caused by those people. And I'm not saying that gentrification is bad. There's many good both pros and cons for gentrification. But the problem is the lack of self-awareness to know that the reason why you have a comfortable life in Williamsburg, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, Clinton Hill, where you hang out at all these new coffee shops and luxury thrift stores, is because you had upward mobility. You were not at the expense of the government for support, and you do not understand the cause and effect of different policies like rent freezes. These people don't have to look around and see the consequences of these actions because when they do look around, they're only surrounded by other successful white liberal people. If these people cared as much as they claim to care about the unaffordability of this city and therefore the gentrification of areas that they live in, they would not live there because you are creating a demand. By being able and willing to pay $9,200 a month for an apartment, you are creating a demand that no one else can keep up with. You're just in a league of your own. You are creating the process of gentrification, the process of pushing people out into areas that they can afford, and yet there's no awareness, there's no accountability, and there's no understanding that socialism will not work here.